Hey, good morning, everybody. So we're going to go through this introduction to Bootstrap. We did a Bootstrap 101 video where it's just crash course, just copying and pasting some code and just seeing how you can get started using Bootstrap. But really, in order to effectively work with Bootstrap, you can kind of get started working with Bootstrap. But to effectively work with Bootstrap, you really got to understand the code and how to write the code and how to manipulate the code. Otherwise, you're going to be very limited in what you can actually do. And so that's what this is really all about, is starting to understand Bootstrap in a deeper manner, right? Because it's certainly a lot more than just copying and pasting code. That's not the kind of developers that we want to be. We want to understand what's going on with the code. So if you look at kind of the promotion slogan of Bootstrap, right? So the purpose of Bootstrap is to build fast, responsive sites, quickly design and customize mobile-first sites. And so that's some keywords there. And we've learned about the mobile-first approach when we studied Flexbox, right? We learned there's a mobile-first approach. We learned there's a desktop-first approach. There's a lot of debate in the industry about which approach was better, but for the most part, the industry now agrees mobile first is the way to go. So Bootstrap is mobile first. What that means is the way that we write Bootstrap, it will scale up easily, efficiently. And so we'll see what I mean by that when we get into writing some code. So it is mobile first. The world's most popular front-end open source toolkit featuring SAS variables and mixins, and we'll touch on what that means, responsive grid system, pre-built components, and JavaScript plugins. And so we'll actually get into, and we saw it a little bit yesterday, a lot of built-in JavaScript functionality. One example of some built-in JavaScript functionality that we saw yesterday, right? You got a nav bar. It's just some links going across the page. And then you minimize to a mobile view, and all of a sudden you get what I call the hamburger menu, right? The hamburger menu is just those 3 lines that you can click on, and all of a sudden you got a vertical nav bar instead of a horizontal one, right? And so there's a lot of built-in JavaScript functionality. Another example that we saw yesterday is with the accordion, right? The accordion was hiding and showing content when the user would click on a heading, right? It would hide and show content. That's JavaScript behind the scenes that's doing that. So there's built-in CSS and there's built-in JavaScript that we get to use both. So a little bit on the history of Bootstrap. For the longest time, it was called Twitter Bootstrap. And so that caused, and now they just call it Bootstrap. But for a long time, they called it Twitter Bootstrap because that's where it was developed by 2 developers at Twitter. And so you can kind of follow them on social media. Bootstrap has become one of the most popular front-end frameworks in the world. To the best of my knowledge, there is no other toolkit that's more used to develop mobile responsive sites, right? There are other toolkits, right? Bootstrap is not the only one. There are others, but this is the most popular. So it makes sense for us in this class, learning to be web developers, to use the most popular toolkit. Bootstrap has had over 20 releases and major rewrites for version 2, 3, and 4. This version, if you go to Get Bootstrap today, getbootstrap.com, we are on version 5.1.1. Okay, so you got the way this works, the way this version system works, is you get the major releases up front, and then you got the feature sets. So if you have new features, it'll go from 0.1 to 0.2 to 0.3. So you got major release, and then you got feature releases, and then you've got bug fixes that come in that third dot. So just like a general rule of thumb, how that works, major releases have a bunch of new features. Okay, then you have feature releases, which might only include a couple of features, and then you've got bug fixes and performance enhancements. So that's what the last one comes. So that's the current version of Bootstrap. I mentioned this yesterday. If you go to the docs, you can change to the different major versions, and you can kind of see these ones were the ones that were around the longest. So version 2, and now we're on, this is the documentation for version 2, right? So if you're working with older Bootstrap sites, you can kind of come into the getbootstrap.com, change your version, and then look up how they did things back in version 2. Okay, because how they did things in version 2 has changed to version 3, version 4. There's a lot of changes all the time. That's why I re-record this lecture every semester pretty much. I did this a year ago, but we were on version 4 a year ago, and there's some pretty big changes. One of the big changes between version 4 and version 5, they used to have jQuery support, and version 5 no longer supports jQuery. And so jQuery is kind of a JavaScript library that's fallen out of favor a little bit. So anyways, so big changes all the time with the different versions. Okay, we're on version 5. Bootstrap has made it much easier to build responsive websites. I would agree with that statement. This is, again, the kind of the promotional, if you will, features of Bootstrap. What are the key benefits of Bootstrap? Again, quick startup. Demonstrated that yesterday, how quickly you can start building Bootstrap. Mobile first, responsive design, and there are themes that you can implement, and we'll kind of see what those themes look like. The idea behind a theme is just kind of like a set of base colors for your site. And so business theme or video game theme, what's your target audience? You can sometimes your target audience has a preferred color set, so there's built-in themes. If you think of themes as just like your colors that you get on your website, and you can customize those colors pretty easily. We did demonstrate how you can get started with Bootstrap by linking to what's called a CDN, right? A CDN, a content delivery network. Okay, and so I demonstrated this yesterday, but I'll do it again today for the purpose of this video. To get started with using Bootstrap, if you just go to the getbootstrap.com and you click on this purple Get Started button, excuse me. It's going to tell you what you need. You need to link to some CSS. You need to link to some JavaScript. But they put it all together for you under the starter template. So when you click on Get Started, you just scroll down. You've got this starter template. And so you've got a link to, again, look at the URL. This is Bootstrap's CSS that's on a CDN. And all that means, somewhere on the internet, there's a web server that's hosting a CSS file that we can use. So a CDN is a content delivery network, is just basically, this is a public file that we can use. And this file, this CSS file, happens to be on jsdeliver.net. Okay, and then this is the full path to it. So that's all a CDN is. And so Bootstrap CSS is available via a CDN. The JavaScript files that you need are also available via a CDN. And so there's actually, you can kind of see here, two different options. This is one JavaScript file that bundles these two features together, the Bootstrap JavaScript and this thing called Popper. Or you can link to two different CDNs. Really just linking to the one is going to be all that we need. So literally just copy that starter template, paste it, and launch it. Now, you might notice out of the box that this font, that doesn't look like a standard H1. Right out of the box, you kind of get a different font on your headings. That's the only markup that we have on here is an H1. Well, why is that? Well, because we have some default CSS that's being applied from Bootstrap CSS. If I inspect, and this is using the mobile view, this is not the mobile view. If I inspect, you can see font size is one thing. So something in here in this SCSS, which needs an explanation what SCSS is. I'll come back to that, but let me kind of go through here. I'm looking for the font. So this is pretty interesting here. The font family that's being applied is coming from this, what's called Reboot SCSS. And you'll notice if I uncheck that, it changes the font. The point, besides, showing you that there's a different font, the whole point here is that there's built-in CSS that we're getting. That built-in CSS comes from this CDN. So there are some default styles. However, can I still apply my own cascading style sheet? Yeah, sure I can. So just as we know how to do, we can come in here and write our own CSS. Okay, so all the CSS that we learned, we can still apply and change fonts, change colors, change all that fun stuff. What you learned about the rules of specificity still apply, right? So IDs are more specific than classes. If you have two selectors that have the same specificity, right, the one that's closer to the content will override the one that's further away, right? So all of our CSS rules still apply, right? We will be writing our own custom CSS. But whole point, there's some built-in CSS with this CDN. If you didn't want to use the CDNs, okay, you could download the JavaScript files that you need. You could download the CSS files that you need, and you could link to them locally. Why might you do that? Well, your Bootstrap site, if you use the CDN, is only as good if that web server or that file is online. If that file goes offline, right, then all of a sudden your Bootstrap CSS is no longer available and your JavaScript is no longer available, thus, aka your website is broken hard, right? So there are pros and cons to using CDNs. Yes?
Does that happen often?
No. See, that's a good question. Does that happen often? No. It's these web servers often have redundancies. so that even if one physical web server were to go down, there's a backup, right? So in theory, could it happen? Yes. Does it happen often? No, right? Good question. Another thing you'll notice is that this is a compiled CSS in JavaScript. I did show this briefly yesterday. What that means is if you actually go to this URL, I can copy this URL and I can go here and you'll notice a couple things. First off, it's a minimized file. It's also said to be compiled. We haven't really compiled any code yet, but what a compiler does is it goes through your code and looks for errors. And when a chunk of code compiles, then the software that you're using, the compiler that you're using, didn't find any errors. So it's safe to say that this is free from syntax errors, meaning missing semicolons, missing colons, right? This is a good, CSS file. They're good JavaScript files. They've been tested. There's, not to say that there are no bugs in them, but they've been thoroughly tested. That's what it means to be compiled. So I can probably go ahead and demonstrate how to download this. So if I go home, let's click on download. Instead of get started, you can click on download. And download Bootstrap. Now this is just another approach. Instead of using the CDN, right? Option 1 is use CDN. For all intents and purposes in this class, you're going to be fine using the CDN. You're not going to have to download it. Okay, but if you wanted to download it, step 1, go to the website, click the download button. Step 2, extract it. Right now, this is extracting it into my downloads folder. That's fine. I'll keep it in my downloads folder. Okay, and I would need to open this up in Visual Studio Code. And you'll notice I don't have an HTML file, so you would create an HTML file, index.htm, right? I'd start here. I'd link to my CSS, Bootstrap, and look at all the CSS files. So I'd probably want to look at, so what are all these CSS files? Well, if you don't use all the features of Bootstrap, maybe you just use the grid. And you could just use the Bootstrap grid CSS, right? So it's kind of like instead of using the full CSS file, you could just use a piece of it, okay? But really, you would just want to find the full CSS file, bootstrap.css. Right? This is going to get you all of the features. And then we need to put in a script tag and link to the JavaScript. JavaScript and bootstrap min.js. And right? Now we got Bootstrap going. Same kind of thing, right? Whether we're using a CDN or whether we're downloading it, two different options. I mentioned that a theme is just your colors, your default colors. You can get some themes at bootswatch.com, so let's check that out. Let me show you bootswatch.com. So what do? simply download a CSS file and replace the one in Bootstrap. No messing around with hex values. So if we want a dark Bootstrap theme that changes all of our components to these various colors, right? So again, who's your target audience? If your target audience is a bunch of teenage boys, they might like a dark theme, right? So you could go to bootswatch.com. Let's find the download button for a dark theme. Let's see, where's download? You're going to download a CSS file, and then as it said there, you just replace the Bootstrap. Let's see. Back to top. Where's download? There it is. Okay. So here's darkly. That's the one that we liked. We already previewed it, so now we're going to download it. Notice all I'm downloading is a bootstrap.min.css. Keep in mind that my Bootstrap download was right here. So I'm just going to go into here, go into my CSS. I'm going to click Save. Do you want to replace it? In this case, sure, I'll replace it. Bootstrap.min.css. So now I'm linking to my Bootstrap min CSS. And now you can see I've changed my theme. All my buttons would follow that theme. My colors would follow that theme. Right? So that's how you can very easily pick some colors based on these built-in themes. You'll notice, when you preview these, fonts are going to be different. Colors are going to be different. Buttons are going to be different, so on and so forth. So that's your Bootstrap themes. Yeah. Well, this one, I just have a downloads folder. I downloaded my local copy of Bootstrap, and this one I'm working in here. I've got two open right now. So you notice this one, I'm working on the local. I've got another Visual Studio, and this one's using the CDN. Why do you ask?
I meant, like, what folder were you working in? Like, did you open up to create the file?
Oh, okay. What I did to create this, if you remember, I went to getbootstrap.com. I downloaded that zip folder. Is that?
No, I just mean, like.
Not understanding.
Like, you open a folder.
Uh-huh.
In Visual Studio Code.
Uh-huh.
And that's where your index.html.
Uh-huh.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, that's in my downloads. And then right here. This is the folder right here that I opened in Visual Studio Code.
Okay.
Yep. I just right-clicked it and opened with code.
Okay.
Yep. Yesterday I got the question, hey Mr. G, we're using Bootstrap CSS, do I need to download Normalize? Should I still use Normalize? And I said, no, actually that's going to be taken care of. You'll notice here there's a feature called Reboot. And if we read through this, for improved cross-browser rendering, we use Reboot to correct inconsistencies across browsers and devices while providing slightly more opinionated resets to common HTML elements. Reboot builds upon Normalize, providing many HTML elements with somewhat opinionated styles using only element selectors. You don't need to include a separate CSS reset or Normalize. With Bootstrap, it's already built in. And so when you use Bootstrap CSS has built into it this feature called Reboot, okay, that handles cross-browser compatibility, right? It's really just built into the CSS. Okay, so this feature called Reboot, basically, they've handled it for us, which is great, right? That's part of the greatness that is Bootstrap. Now, you'll notice here there's a URL that you could read more about this. This is on 4.5. This is a URL for 4.5. I imagine we can find the version 5 in the documentation. So you can go through and read a little bit more about Reboot. I just searched for it on the site. Again, installation from a CDN, pretty simple using that starter template. There's a couple of links in the slides. These slides are already slightly dated. Always, just go to getbootstrap.com. Use the most current version starter template. You're not going to get dated information from these slides. There is an attribute for maintaining integrity. Basically, anytime you use a CDN, you want to make sure that the file that you're using is the correct file. And so there is a SHA-256 hashing algorithm that's used that basically does this. You guys know the game of telephone? The game of telephone says if Ryan passes a message to Mark and then everyone whispers it in their ear around the classroom, by the time it got to Jacob, it would be a different message, right? That's what this integrity prevents. What we're saying is, hey, I want to download this file from the internet, and this integrity attribute verifies that the file that we intend on download is the same file that ends up on our computer. It's not changing. In other words, someone isn't intercepting the file, introducing some rogue JavaScript that changes the behavior of our Bootstrap site. Okay, because that's called a man-in-the-middle attack. And that's what this integrity attribute that uses what's called a SHA-256 hashing algorithm is used to prevent. Basically, it's the game of telephone. The message that we're trying to download is the same thing that we actually download. Okay, so this integrity attribute is valuable to us. Let's pop that open here. There's our integrity attribute. That's for this CSS. Here's the integrity attribute for the JavaScript. Again, this basically preventing those man-in-the-middle attacks. That just comes with the starter template. I just wanted to, point out that's basically what that does. Yeah, you want to keep that in there. Yeah, keep it all. Yep. All right. We did mention that Bootstrap is a mobile-first site, way to develop websites. They break down their breakpoints into various categories. And the way it works is if you say, hey, I want 3 columns on extra small devices, Extra small devices go from 0 pixels wide basically up to 575, right? So extra small, I'm thinking cell phones, right? Landscape modes, standing up, are extra small. Now, in the notes, I kind of put here. Let's see if I can. Go to layout breakpoints. Historically, they would actually tell us how these line up. Small devices for landscape phones. Extra small devices for portrait phones. Thank you. Portrait for extra small. Small devices, landscape phone. Medium devices, tablets. Large devices, desktops. Extra large, large desktops. Extra, extra large, larger desktops. Okay, so generally speaking, these handle that pretty well. Okay, so the categories by name, we know the categories. We will use the categories by name, but they translate into these types of devices. And so if I go on my Bootstrap site and I say for extra small devices, I want 3 columns. In this row, I want 3 columns. Well, it's mobile first. So those 3 columns will be there on extra small, small, medium, large, and extra, extra large, right? So if you say for the smallest device, this is how I want the styling to be, it automatically scales up on all these other categories because it's mobile first.
So we don't have to do that.
You don't have to change it unless you want to change it. So that's why it was kind of good practice in our last labs to do mobile first. Because how did that work? We styled for mobile first, and it automatically scaled up unless we changed it. Bootstrap works the same way. So here you can see, again, the breakpoints. Extra small, small, medium, large, extra, extra large. So again, these categories by name are how we're going to code these things. The categories by name are how we code them, but they translate, into these different categories.
That was a great point that you went on Bootstrap.
Yeah, so on the site, under Docs, I went under Layout, and then I clicked on Breakpoints. Okay, very good page to remember where it's at for a reference point. Okay, because again, so the classifications here, you'll notice, and I'm using the website instead of my PowerPoint intentionally on this one. For extra small, there's no prefix. Small, SM, medium, MD, large, they all make sense. I guess the one thing worth noting, extra small has no prefix. Okay, and we'll see how when we actually start coding this, we'll see what that looks like. No prefix versus SM. Because here, the extra small, look, had XS. So again, I used extra small here instead of the extra small So that's the second thing that I would say this PowerPoint needs updated. Let me do a quick demonstration. If I go to the grid system, you'll notice, okay, so the first thing that I haven't really said yet, that before we get into the grid system, everything in Bootstrap is done by adding classes in your HTML. By adding classes in your HTML, that's how you get the functionality, right? So you know classes, you got an attribute called class, and then you assign a certain value to that class. So you'll notice on the extra small column here, there's no XS. It's just call. The class is called call. So there's no XS prefix like there used to be, right? So that's different. Well, you'll notice how on small devices it's call SM. For medium, there's call MD. For large, call LG. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a Bootstrap grid. The magic number to remember here is 12. 12 is the magic number. Okay. And what that means is you can add up to 12 columns of space. So if I do 4, 4, and 4, 4, 4, and 4, that's basically 3 columns that add up to 12, right? 4 plus 4 is 8 plus 4 is 12, right? So if I do 8 and 4, I'm going to get 2 columns, one that's twice as big as the other. All right, so if I do call 444, that's 3 columns. If I do call 8 and 4, I'm going to demonstrate it, okay? Because it's one thing to hear me say it, it's another thing to see me code it. Okay. So if we're going to do rows and columns, the first thing that's a requirement, and as you go through here, you'll see you need a parent container. So I'm going to do div class container. So let's put that in first. You guys remember the wrapper div in HTML and how we used it? When you have a div with a class of container, you're going to get similar functionality. Again, we didn't have to code the CSS for container. It's already built into Bootstrap. And so you'll notice, if you remember what the wrapper div did, the wrapper div took the white space, it was all on the right, and it justified it some on the left, some on the right. Right? We had a width of 80%, we had 10% left on the left, 10% left on the right. That's what our container does. If I look at my container, I can click on here, and you can see that beige color is our margin. Right? So we've got now our content justified more centered on the page. It's not like text center, but that's what container is going to do for us. Now we're going to add a row. If I go back to the documentation, you see I've got a class of container. Then I've got the class of row. So let's add a div class of row, and then we add div classes with column. Now I want to show you how we add up to 12, because 12 is the magic number, right? So I'm going to do call -4 4 times. So let's get into the code. So I'm going to do div class of row, close the div, div class call -4. Div class call -4. Because there's no prefix, there's no XS or small or large or anything like that, that we're saying that this is for extra small devices and up. There's going to be 3 columns on extra small devices and up. Call 1, call 2, call 3. So this is our grid system. What did we need to do so far? We had a container, and we had a row, and then we had the call class, and they have to add up to 12. They should add up to 12. And you can see the way this works. Mobile first. Let's go into our cell phone. We got 3 columns on cell phone. And all the way up, I suppose there's a little bit of wrapping going on here, which is what you're seeing, content wrapping, because eventually there's just no space for it. But the idea here is extra small and up, all 3 columns. Okay? Now what if you want to change that? What if when you get to a larger device, you don't want 3 columns, maybe you want something different? That's where you can use a prefix. Let's go back to the grid system. So let's say when you go to a medium device, 768 pixels. Again, what is that? If we go to breakpoints, we say medium devices are our tablets. Okay, roughly speaking. Okay, these are tablets. So I'll go back to the grid. Call medium hyphen, and then we give it a number. So you could say, okay, for extra small devices and small devices, so it goes extra small and small, we're going to have 3 columns. Call medium we're going to add up to 12, 6. So what's going to happen here is it's going to actually be 2 rows. Just as an example, right? We're going to get 1 row of call 1 and 2, and then this will bump back down. Just for this demonstration, you could see that once you're in a medium device, we're no longer in. So that's working as intended. Does that make sense? Let me go to inspect. And let me go to my cell phone. So here's my cell phone. Once I break that medium breakpoint, which I forget the exact width, but whatever that is right there, right? Because each row adds up to 12. So that's why we get this behavior, right?
So then if you put all the rows to B12, would they like align all in the column?
Yeah, so what if we do all 12? That's a good question. So let's just say, again, let's just that's what you would expect, right? Now, if you go to the docs, I just want to point this out. This example here, where you don't have a number, if you leave the number off, it'll put them in a single row for you. It'll do the math for you, right? So in this case here, where you've got 3 divs. Like you could add 4 divs, you could make it 5 divs. It's going to put them all in one row up until you get 13 of them. Then it'll spill it over to the next one. So that's something that used to not be the case. You used to always have to do the math manually to add up to 12. But now they just have it so where if you just put a bunch of div class of calls, like let me just throw that in there. I'm going to close this one because I'm not using it. Right, so there's 6, and it's going to put 6 columns. If you leave the numbers off, it'll add up to 12 for you. And then it should, I believe, overflow. So that's 6. If I double it, that's 12. So we got 12. Let's put 6 more. I believe that's going to overflow. Yeah, it does. It puts as many as it can. And then it automatically responds based on the width. So it's not really based on 12, I don't think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, it's not based on 12, it's just based on the width. Yeah.
So I'm a little confused as to why you put col 12, or sorry, col 4 originally. Is that because you wanted to take up 4 rows of space?
Yeah, 4 of the 12 column widths.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, so originally just kind of going back to what I did, col -4, right? So what if I did col -6? Well, that'll be 50-50.
Right.
Col 1, col 2, and because there's no like call medium or call large, it's extra small and up. It's for all of the breakpoints.
And then does it put the content in? Oh, I see. Okay, so it kind of puts it over to the left a little bit.
Because if we inspect, we'll see kind of.
Okay. That makes sense.
The spacing that it's taken up. So yeah, the thing about the grid system is, understanding it's mobile first, and so it only changes, like in this demonstration when I said call 6. On the hands-on test, what did I say? I said something like, trying to do the example, I think in mobile it was a column, right? So in mobile it was a column, and then as we scaled up it was 2 by 2. So call medium 6, call medium 6. So if we go here and we start putting images in here instead of call this call, let's call this div. It's going to help div 4. So what I'm saying here is that these 4 divs are going to be in a single column on extra small and small. And then when I scale up to medium, they're going to break into 2 columns per row. Right? And then what I said on desktop, what's the abbreviation for desktop? Desktop would be large, right? Call LG. On call LG, I had, was it 4 by 4?
It was just 4 across.
It was 4 across. So we'll say so call LG -3. Call LG -3 because we're adding up to 12, right? Call LG 3. So this is the equivalent in the grid system of what we did on our hands-on test.
And you can put an image there.
You can put images in there, yeah. So that's on the large, we've got a single row. Scale down at some point, we should get 2 by 2. Scale down, we get into a column. You guys appreciate this a little bit more now?
You couldn't have taught us this first. No, I'm just kidding.
Why wouldn't I teach you this
You
first?
gotta know everything before you do this.
Bootstrap, if this control isn't what you want it to be, you can still use Flexbox. Bootstrap uses Flexbox, and that's actually part of this lecture. We'll see how to use Flexbox in Bootstrap. As if Flexbox wasn't complex enough, we got to add how it is in Bootstrap. But so yeah, so grid system made easier with Bootstrap. All right, let's pause, and you guys could take a break here. Okay, so we're back from a break here, and during break I pointed out that outside of the couple of things that I pointed out with the differences in versions, so I do have some updated PowerPoints that I'm going to be referencing, and again I kind of pointed out the differences with the extra small having no abbreviation. But I do have this updated PowerPoint, and I can make that available to you. I'm just going to be using this updated one. Your one is 95% fine. Where we left off after talking about viewports, the next slide here is on spacing. And we've done spacing with the box model going back to chapter 5, right? So the main spacing tools that we learned were both margin and padding, right? Understanding the difference that padding's inside of the box, margin is outside of the box. And so we can do the same spacing with Bootstrap, but like everything else in Bootstrap, it's done with classes. And so we just have to learn the margin classes and the padding classes. And so this is 0 margin on all 4 sides, M-0. 1 and what does 1 unit of margin actually mean? Versus 2, versus 3. You can get that answer by going to the utilities, right? So under the Bootstrap docs, under utilities, we have a lot of things, colors, but eventually we got our spacing. And so this is telling us that there is some variable called spacer that's some measurement, and 1 unit is this 1 means spacer times 0.25. 2 units is the spacer times 0.5. 3 units is equal to just the spacer, right? 4 units is the spacer times 1.5. So it's a calculation basically. And so let's actually apply some margin to an element. So I don't know, I'm just going to put an H3 in here. And that H3 will say hello class. Actually, maybe I'll just make it a span. I'm thinking span. What the heck, just for So we could see our div has some padding on it, but our span doesn't really have much going on. Let's add a class. And per this slide, we could just say M3, M-3. Now, probably you could see we've got now some margin on the left and right. There's really no root. It didn't apply it to the top and bottom, but it did apply it to the left and right. So this is span with the class of M3. Let's change that to M5. You can see clearly that's adding more margin.
Is it not adding it to the top and bottom because it's an inline element?
Yeah, that's kind of, if I'm thinking if I change this to a block level element, like an H3, let's change this to an H3. Now it's adding it to all four sides like those inline elements, changing their spacing is not as easy as with the block. So yeah, so that's on top on all four sides. It's on all four sides. So M5. In this case, this is 3 rems is what it is boiling down to. Of course, if we just change that to P, yeah, right?
So if you wanted to be like more specific with like, if you wanted to add just a few pixels,
Yeah.
you have to do your own style sheet.
Yeah, if you wanted to do something different, there are the built-in classes so that you can use these built-in, but you can always do your own. You can always do your own custom CSS. Okay, and just by changing this from margin to padding, you can see now the spacing. It's just moving things around. White space is white space, but whether it's margin or padding, you could tell the difference when you inspect it.
Let me see how to put the color back in.
One more time?
Can you show me how to put the color in?
Yeah. Yep. Let me close all these that I'm not using. And then we've got, just like just before, how we would say to auto justify margins, you've got M-auto. And if you ever want to auto justify margins like we did on the wrapper, right? On the wrapper, we would say margin 0 top and bottom, auto justify left and right. They do have the M.auto. They also have the flexibility, what if you just want to add it to one side? So M3 is all sides. I'm not going to demonstrate all of these. You can get the idea just by MT is obviously margin top, MB margin bottom. MS is the left. ME is the right. MX, if you think about the x-axis, is left and right. MY is the y-axis for top and bottom. Then the same abbreviations for padding. So you can get specific on what side you want it on. The way to center an element, and kind of like we displayed before, you do want that element to be display block, and it needs a width set. So in this case, let's go ahead and code this. How to center an element. Let's go ahead and for now take off our columns and rows. So this is going to be a div, so it's going to be a block level element. The class is MX auto. So margin on the X axis is auto. MX auto. So class MX auto with, and then we're going to set a style. If you inspect this, .500 pixels wide, content in the center of it. So again, it's not text align centered, but it does just very much like our wrapper did. Let's take off the width here. Yeah, then let me go out of this responsive view here. Click, click. There we go. Yeah, that's why you got to give it a width. So MX Auto is going to help you to do some horizontal centering. You can get pretty detailed in what you want. So much like we could have different number of columns per row as we scale up, you could have different margin as you scale up across the breakpoints. So M0 means 0 margin for extra small, small, medium until we hit large. Then it says 3 units of margin once we're at large and extra large devices. So you can get pretty, well, there it is right there. It actually tells us on the screen what I just read out loud. Extra small, small, medium. 1 rem on large and extra large. So M0 means extra small and small. Medium is 2 units or 0.5 rems on medium. 3 units or 1 rem. Extra large devices is 3 rems. So again, as we're going through the breakpoints, you can change your margin, you can change your padding. There are some classes to control width. So the W hyphen and then the number, right? So W hyphen 25 is 25%, 50%, 75%, 100% width. And now this is, again, this is relative to the parent. So let's go into here. Width hyphen 75. That's what width 75 is. If I take that off, you could see how that moves it. So you can see we're getting a width of 75%. So fairly useful. So there's width, which is just the W hyphen, and then there's max width, which we've used, and max height. So MW and MH for max width and max height. So there's sizing relative to parent versus sizing relative to the viewport. So the class of minimum viewport width 100 is equivalent to the CSS of min width 100 VW. So we did do some sizing a little bit in the class, not a ton, of viewport width and viewport height instead of relative to its parent element. Okay, colors in Bootstrap. Again, everything's done with classes. So, just kind of quickly go through what we just recapped, right? Margin and padding on a single side, horizontal centering with MX Auto, right? These are just classes that we're adding into our Bootstrap, and it's changing the way things look. Margin based on your viewport. Changing the width of an element based on its parent, changing the width of an element based on the viewport. Okay, all done with classes. That's kind of the nice thing about Bootstrap. The more you know about what classes it has to offer, the more control you have. What does that mean? Well, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to write as much of your own CSS when you can use the classes that are built into Bootstrap. Colors. So let's just change. You're going to see a lot of this in Bootstrap. Changing text color but to text primary. So let's just throw this in here. Class of text hyphen primary. Right? We get this shade of blue. Now what happens when you change your theme? Text primary might be a different color. It might not be the shade of blue. Right? But we can kind of go through here. Text danger. Right? Change it to red, change it to blue, change it to green for success. Right? It's actually making our job a little bit easier, right? We're just adding classes to thing and getting colors. We no longer have to go into the CSS and write, target the heading and then write the color and then give it a hex value. It's put in the name of the color and it pops out. Now you put in the Bootstrap name, right? You see this a lot, right? So it'll be part of your lab where you're changing colors and things like this, but yeah, right?
So what if we wanted to just change one color directly? Can we make our own CSS style sheet and then target the selector primary? Or will that mess with the?
Oh, you could override it. Okay, so let's talk about that. So here's text success. It's a class. Class text success. Color blue violet. And let's see. Now, why did that not work? Probably because it's got an important tag on it. They don't want you overriding it. So you got to make your own classes. I would not override theirs because they've got this important keyword which overrides, even though ours is closer to the content or whatever, it doesn't matter because it's been marked as important. So if you want to change colors, don't override what they've done, just make your own classes and use those classes. So that's text colors. Background colors is BG. So text success, BG primary. Can't read it, but you see what it does. Right? Changing background colors with BG hyphen, BG primary, secondary success, danger warning info, light, dark. You see this a lot. BG hyphen dark on the nav bar. BG hyphen light on the nav bar. So these are pretty straightforward. They tell you that these are for the text. This is straightforward. The classes say BG, background. Border. Let's throw borders. Border, space. Now this is also something you haven't seen yet because you need to add, to get borders, you need to add two classes. You need the class of border and the border color. So let's do border, border, danger. Right, so sometimes it's common to add multiple classes with Bootstrap. I would say it's somewhat common on an element, on an HTML element. You might have 5 or 6 or 7 classes because they all are doing their own styling, right? And the way you add classes is just keep on typing them out with spaces in between them. And that's just adding more style rules to that element with each class. Text alignment, text center. Dot text center gives you the CSS of text align center. Text hyphen center. Gives you text align center, so on and so forth. Text end is right aligned. Text start is by default left aligned. And then you could do text at a breakpoint. Text medium center. Text hyphen MD hyphen center. So at the different viewports. Text transform. You've kind of seen some of this by making something all uppercase or lowercase. I believe we touched on text transform before, but basically, you know, making your text all capitalized or all lowercase.
What's the difference between capitalized and uppercase?
You can kind of see it in the demo. So,
It's like just random things are capitalized.
well, let's do it. Let's do text capitalized. Capitalized.
I think it's just,
So whatever the default is, let's do then text uppercase. Right, and then lowercase.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I think with you type capitalize, if you just capitalize with no D at the end.
Text capital. Oh, did I have a D?
Yeah.
So
it capitalizes like the first letter.
yeah.
Okay.
How are you doing? Capitalize.
So
Now
keeps
it
your
capitalize C, H, kept the R, at least.
It keeps your capitalizes, but
Uh-huh.
it adds one to the beginning of every word.
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it keeps what you have capitalized, but it also makes sure every word is capitalized.
That's cool.
You're getting the hang of this, right? Just adding classes and you're getting CSS. Add classes, get CSS. Obviously, you need to practice it for you to get it down, to get comfortable with it. Font weight, making something bold, FW bold. Again, whether it's bold or bolder, that works sparingly, right? I've demonstrated, actually getting something more bold than just normal bold is not always browser compliant. Font weight normal, font weight light, lighter, italic, and normal. So all varying levels, if they work, of boldness, italics, and not italic. In my experience, you can get most of the positioning that you need without having to resort to Flexbox. But Bootstrap can use Flexbox. So if you want to continue using Flexbox, instead of using the grid system, you can use Flexbox, right?
Back to the last slide
Yeah.
about like the bold and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Will that be like accessible? What with like accessibility, like how you have like a strong tag and like text reader would read it differently?
So you typically still want to keep the accessibility focused keywords in the strong tag. Yeah. So it's literally the difference of, okay, do I change this with markup or do I change it with CSS? You could always change something to be bold with CSS, but those screen readers aren't going to pick up on that, right? So if you want the screen readers to pick up on it, you still got to use the strong tag. So I demonstrated the grid system and how we could use it. And where I would not use the grid system is if I've tried to use a grid system and I don't have the amount of control that I want, right? I would argue that Flexbox can offer more control to really get things positioned exactly how you want. So let's tell a parent to display Flex and just demonstrate how we could begin using Flexbox with Bootstrap. So let's go ahead and have a parent div and some child headings. Right, so we just got parent div, child headings, class of display flex. As here on the slide, we're adding the dflex class to the parent. And as you would anticipate, we have flex children, right? Then we want to go into the justify content. So how do we justify content? Of course, we could change the flex direction into flex column. So let's do that before we justify content. Let's just put it back into column. So deflex flex hyphen column. Puts them back. this tells us, in this particular case, for small, extra small, small, medium to be in column, large and extra large to be in row. So vertical flex box on smaller, horizontal on larger. Let's justify content between. So our classes justify content between. It's going to get us to space between. Justify hyphen content hyphen between. Justify content between. Save it, launch it. Kind of coming back to you, Flexbox.
Like all the code kind of same.
It's similar, very similar, same names.
It's like SQL, like JavaScript.
Mm-hmm. Very similar, very similar. Yeah.
Can you make that like the way you just said with the words? Could you do that for like a background for your website? Like where it's multiple words or just something? Huh?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, so when you talk about backgrounds, just by adding classes, we'd add background colors. Maybe if you were talking about like background images,
Just the words.
you were talking about background images, yeah.
Yeah, but in the background, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, for example, you could change the background color of the body tag using that class. So
As far as just like a picture in your background.
no pictures, just colors.
Yeah, the color. Okay.
Yep. So all the documentation is here. How to align items, justify content, align self. Right. I'm not gonna dig down into this as deep as we did with Flexbox, because if you understood the concepts there with Flexbox and you understand Bootstrap, you just gotta meld the two concepts together. Okay, so history of Bootstrap, where it came from, used to be called Twitter Bootstraps, gone through a bunch of different versions. Benefits of Bootstrap, mobile first, responsive sites. You can do it quickly. You've got themes. I will tell you another benefit that we didn't cover. There's themes. There's also templates. Okay, Bootstrap templates. Now, DJ, we've talked about this in the past. Templates, in my opinion, and this is an opinion here, okay? Templates are very useful in getting good looking sites. I'm not a designer, okay? I'm not an artist by nature. It's not my background. I haven't taken art classes, right? And since 3rd grade. So when it comes to the design aspect of my website, I choose to outsource the design because I'm not a designer. What that enables me to do is get really good looking websites without being a designer. Now, different approaches to teaching this class. I want you to know the code. I'm teaching you the code. We're going to learn the code. You're tested over the code, hands-on tests and everything else. Okay? The issue with templates, right? Because we talked about themes. Themes are just color themes. Templates, you download Bootstrap templates that are full sites, and then you customize them for your client. Okay, and what that allows you to do is have a template of a starting point of code, and then you customize that site for your client. And so again, there's Bootstrap Themes, free Bootstrap templates are something that this slideshow does not talk about. And templates, like for example, ThemeForest is a site. I know several of these sites where you can sometimes, many times, oftentimes, especially for this class, I don't recommend paying for it, right? But you can pay for a template, right? And if I want like a corporate looking Bootstrap site, I can go to a site like ThemeForest. You know, maybe I've got restaurant and I want a website template that I could start with a good looking site. And a lot of these are just a little bit of JavaScript and Bootstrap. And so could I make a site looking like this from scratch? Probably not. Can I start with a template with my knowledge of HTML, with my knowledge of CSS, with my knowledge of Bootstrap? Can I take this template, customize it for my client, and give them a really good looking website? Yes. Why don't some people agree with my opinion here? Some people don't agree because they think you should create everything from scratch. And I would argue that that's not always the most efficient approach, nor does it produce the best results. I've taught this class for over 10 years now. Okay? I've had students make portfolio sites with templates and without templates. And nearly 100% of the time I've taught this class, when students use templates, when I show these portfolios to outsiders, they go, oh, that's a good looking site. That looks good. But when students don't use templates, I don't get that same reaction most of the time. Okay, I get more positive reactions when students use templates because I don't teach design, nor do I know everything there is to know. I know very little about it. Okay, so and I would, so there's a point of when you're going through school, you think you have to know everything. You think you have to know every line of code, and that's just simply not always the case. Sometimes it's about doing a good job and doing it fast. And I will tell you, I've had employers tell me it's about, hey, I'm just trying to pump out as many websites as I can in a week, right? So we use templates. With that being said, so let's just say you're doing a real live site for a client. You might bake in the cost of a good template into your fees, right? They don't. Typically what I do is I say, look, Mr. or Miss Client, I'm not a designer. So I start many of my coding projects from a template and then I customize it for your needs. So let me show you 5 templates that I like around restaurants. This will be one. This would be one. This would be one. Tell me which one you like the best as a starting point. Now, if you don't know HTML, do you think you can customize this? No. If you don't know Bootstrap, do you think you can customize this? No. So this is not like a drag and drop, like Wix type of thing. This is a outsourcing the design, which I think is smart. Because when you don't have a skill set, it can be smart to outsource it. Yeah.
So when you get one of these templates, what does it actually do? Like, what do you start with?
Yeah, so what you do, let's see if I can find a free one real quick. You'll download a zipped folder. I know, here, let me show you free Bootstrap templates. I know that this one, like this is one I use all the time, okay? This is just like a real clean, like Bootstrap site, free download. You notice it went down here. Okay, extract it. This is going to be in my downloads. So I just downloaded a zip folder. I extract it. Okay, now I can open this in code. What exactly do you get? You get images. You get Bootstrap. You get CSS. Right? So if I launch this, this is the site. Right? So if I were making this my portfolio, you know, change up the links. So here's the links. Change up the links. Right? There's my nav bar. Right? There's my heading. I'll put my name here, right? Just instead. See what I mean? Here's the image. So instead of this SVG image, I could put evangudmested.jpg. Right? Get my image to show up. Right? I want to change this color. How do I change the color? Well, let's inspect this. Right? So let's click on here. Let me dock this real quick because I can see it better. So I got to find where the background color is. So there's header. So BG primary. See this header class of BG primary? Well, that's blue. Text of white, so text color of white. Text center. Remember all these Bootstrap classes that we just got done learning, right? There they are in use. But I'm kind of curious on this header tag. So if I go into header, I just don't want to remove BG primary. I don't know that that's going to change it. Oh, there it goes. Took the background color off, right? So let's put in BG danger, right? Change the background color, right? Change the HTML, change the CSS. Templates are a way to get good looking sites done quickly. Does that change it? You have to know the code? No. I think coding students, and I've had alumni say this, they say, you think you got to know everything. You don't have to know everything, right? You don't have to know. Is it important to understand how Bootstrap works? Absolutely. Is it important to understand the different classes? Absolutely. But sometimes it's about just getting the job done and getting the job done well, right? And like I said, I've had more positive feedback when my students use templates than when they don't. Okay? Mark?
There's there places where you can change the word fonts to any type of fonts?
One more time?
The word fonts, like
The
the type of,
Yeah, so we haven't got to that yet.
okay.
But there are ways to change your fonts so there are built-in fonts on your computer, and let's just say there's hundreds of them. But there's also fonts that you can they can download, and basically it all happens automatically in the background. So basically there's called CSS3 fonts. And you can make your website serve up fonts so they can download the font and use it, and you can get your words looking however you want them to look, right? The big thing there is called Google Fonts.
It's another website, like, it's another website too, because my brother has his own little basketball league team, and I was kind of helping him, and they had like literally thousands of fonts, like space fonts, and
Yeah, Google Fonts is the biggest one that I know of, but I know there are plenty of others.
yeah, like it was like cool. Like I didn't know they sold them like that.
Okay, so what we talked about spacing, margin, and padding. We talked about sizing, right? So how do we change the width of a div, right? Text colors, background colors, making text bold, making text italic, flexbox. Lots covered there. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording here.